and welcome to week 12 of legal research. So this is it. This is the end. It's a interesting journey, I hope, and I hope you've learnt some things along the way. And the purpose of this week really is to try and tie up some of those loose ends. So in appreciation of the fact that this is the time of term when everything is due at once, we haven't really heavily loaded this part of the course with a lot of work and extra requirements. There's one task this week, and that's to write a short letter to a future law student explaining what you would do differently, or to give them some advice, or to say what you would do differently if you had to start over again in terms of research skills. So it's not a terribly formal piece, of course, it's very informal, but the idea is to reflect on what you've done and to think about and go, well, you know what, I really wish I'd known how to do this earlier on. And that's not only a good exercise for you, but it's also good feedback for us. So we can start thinking about the way in which we improve the overall curriculum to help you with those skills. And as we draw to a close, this is an opportunity for you to also think forward about those skills. Now, we've adopted that skills auditing approach in this subject, which means that we've developed that matrix of skill level from absolute beginner through to postgraduate, with the hope that you'll be able to map yourself somewhere along that path, and hope that you'll be able to put yourself somewhere close to the level C, the second year level of skills as you go through this program, and be able to look back at those and say, okay, yeah, I've done that, and these are the things I need to go up to the next skill level. And that's really important because that's about owning your learning and seeing learning as a process of improvement and improvement against a set of professional standards, not seeing learning as a number of obstacles that are put in your path and things that you've just got to do to get through to the next part of the course, which unfortunately is the way that a lot of courses are structured, and it's sort of the default way of thinking about education as just being a series of tasks that you have to do that someone forces you to do. I'd suggest that that's not only a fairly depressing way to think about your education, but it's also a very disempowering way, because you're just seeing everything as outside your control. It's much better to see these things as things that you have control over, and you get to make those decisions, because that is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your career. Once you've qualified, there's not going to be someone standing over your head and saying, you know what you need to learn to do to go forward is this, and I'm going to make you do it, and I'm going to crack the whip. So you need to move into that professional mindset where you look seriously at what it is you do, and then say, well, going forward, I need to be able to do these, and what am I going to be able to do to achieve that? How am I going to be able to achieve those things? So that moves into the idea of reflection as a professional skill, and tying it to professional development and your ability to assess your professional development needs and go to an employer, for instance, and say, you know what, I really need to learn how to use this new thing that's come along, and I need your support. I need the time to do it, and I need the financial support to do a short course or whatever. This also connects us back to the idea of the portfolio-based learning, and I hope that you will be considering, if you're someone who has been doing a lot of extracurriculars and has been accruing artifacts as you go, and I'd certainly recommend that's the path to employability, recommend that you consider the third-year elective subject, the legal professional portfolio subject, because in that subject you get to basically cash in all those experiences, all those extra things you've done, the volunteering, the work experiences that you've had. You get to include them in a portfolio and then be assessed on them, and that's, I think, a very important and valuable thing going forward to have. Alright, so the workshop this week, as I mentioned before, is focusing on that question of the letter to a beginning student and getting you to really think about that. You know what, this is something that I wish I'd known earlier. And that leads us into the idea, into the feedback realm generally, and reminder that those Have Your Say surveys are up there, and there are really three things that I'd like to focus on in the comments feedback, or three questions that I'm interested in. You can say what you like in the feedback comments, but the three things I'm particularly interested in. One is the method of communication we use in this subject. Obviously, we trialled perusal this time. Some people liked it, some people didn't. I have an ambivalent attitude to it. I'm interested to see what you have to say. But is there a better way of communicating? What are the weaknesses of our approach? Because we are really looking for what is the best way, particularly for people who are engaging asynchronously, to have their opinion known. It's very easy to talk to people in a synchronous tutorial and say, what is it you'd like? But it's much harder to get the opinions from people who are, watching the videos later and aren't necessarily going to send me an email, although you always can, but aren't necessarily going to send me an email and say, this is what I prefer. So the first question is about that communication platform. What would be a better way to have people stay in touch? The second is on the topics themselves, what's included in this particular under the umbrella of legal research. Obviously, some people are going to like some things, some people are going to like others, and you have to have a bit of give and take there. But particularly, is there something that we missed? Is there something that you think, I still don't know how to do X? Let us know. And similarly, is there something that you think, I really wish I'd known how to do this in first year? It'd be really useful if this particular thing was emphasised more in the first year curriculum. Now, it may be that thing already is in the first year curriculum and you've just forgotten about it. And that happens quite often because there is so much that's covered then. But please let us know if there's something that you think that this would be a very relevant thing to include. Or look at the overall curriculum development across the whole law degree, not just in terms of isolated subjects. And the third thing would be interesting to have your opinion on is the need for more practical exercises, more can you do this practically? And then how do we include those? Because it's very difficult to include this sort of stuff in a meaningful way. We know from experience that if we attach marks to it, what we end up with is a large amount of collaboration among students, because basically you don't want to run the risk of doing it wrongly. You basically go, let's share notes / let's say cheat. But we find there is widespread collaboration as soon as you put grades on something that has a simple answer. So driving it by grade isn't necessarily going to work, and forcing people who don't want to get involved, I don't think is very useful either, because people just drag their feet and say, I don't want to do this. But if you are someone who said, I would really like to have more hands-on work, what would motivate you to do that? Would digital badging be something, something you can put in your portfolio and say, not only did I complete legal research, but I've got a badge in legislation note finding or whatever else? Or is it just the fact that these are optional things that you'd like to do? And if we could run one-off seminars or whatever on these topics and get people working on them. So obviously this stuff is much easier to do in a face-to-face context, where I could sit you all down in a computer lab in a tutorial and say, okay, we're doing this now, and watch what you do. It's more difficult in this environment, but still very interested in your ideas as to how we'd make that work. So those are the three things that I'm particularly interested in feedback on. The communication methods, how we stay in touch, the topics themselves, and if there is something that you really thought when you started doing legal research, I'm going to learn how to do this, and we didn't do. And the third thing is, how do we include more of those practical tasks along the way? And should that be something that's just an optional extra? Is there a way of motivating that in a way that you'd respond to? Because I know from experience, if we say, hey, we've got special seminars on, not many people show up for them. So we need to think really seriously about, we only have limited resources to spend on all these things. Where will we use those resources that will do the most good? All right, so what's next? What's next for you folks? Well, you're going to sharpen your research skills throughout the remainder of your undergrad degree, and then possibly on to other programs. So if you've decided that research is something that you have a taste for, the honours program is a research degree. So you do a year of research studies and you really work on those research skills in focus, and you create a dissertation that develops your expertise in a particular area of law. And that can go further. You can go on to masters, perhaps. I'm not so enamoured with law masters myself. I'd suggest you look at going into a PhD though, because that's becoming pretty much a new standard for postgrad education, and you get to call yourself doctor, which is great when dealing with Telstra or whoever, and they make them call you doctor, because it's not so good when you're on a plane and the flight attendants ask you if you're a medical doctor, which actually did happen to me once. And it's like, oh, sorry, I hope someone's not having a baby or something, because I'm not going to be any good with that. But anyway, that's something, a topic for further discussion later on. That, but think about these skills, and the idea of research is something that accrues over time, and it's something that can have that end in sight. Even if you're not looking at further study, your research skills are going to develop throughout your professional career. And careers, because you're going to have multiple law jobs, and you're going to end up somewhere very different from where you think you're going now. That's the only real certainty in life, is uncertainty. You might be dead set that this is where you're going to go, and this is your career path, and this is what it's going to be. Speak to you 5-10 years from now, and you'll be somewhere very, very different from there, and hopefully having a great time with it. So you need to be flexible and keep open to those ideas of different careers that can emerge out of law, and not see legal research as something that's very, very narrow, that's just focused on what you think a certain type of lawyer does, because in reality, being a lawyer is much more like being a jack of all trades. So that's the end of the program. I think my final comments would be that this year, the idea of fake news has really exploded, and this is something that's it's crept up on us for a little while, but it's something we've suddenly realised how irrational the world has become, and how we've gotten to the point where the what people believe is so out of touch in many cases with reality, and there are significant forces out there driving this irrationality. It's something that worries us. And many people are very concerned about what do we do when people believe things that are patently untrue. And this really emphasises the importance of research, not just as a professional skill, but as a citizenship skill, and something that everyone needs to be able to have. They need that sort of information literacy. They need that ability to look at information, understand it, see where its sources come from, look at the credibility of the foundations of the research. So I guess my final thought is that in a world of fake news, what we need more than ever before are good researchers. So I hope you've enjoyed this semester, or I hope you've found it challenging and engaging, and something which has pushed you to develop your skills. And I'm very keen to talk to you folks later on about the honours program, if that's the path that you wish to go in. So drop me a line, and as I said, please put in those feedback to have your say, but also please send me an email or book a time to talk to me, because I really like to have those conversations as well.